The rain was falling in heavy sheets, turning the grocery store parking lot into a blur of silver and shadow. Ethan tightened his jacket around him, his boots splashing through shallow puddles as he led his daughter, Emily, toward their rusty pickup. They were almost at the truck when he heard it, a sharp cry laced with fear. His gaze snapped toward the sound. Under the dim glow of a flickering light, a young woman was backed against a wall by two men, their voices low and threatening. Ethan didn't hesitate. Years of discipline from his time as a Marine snapped into place, and his body moved before his mind could catch up. He sent Emily into the truck, locked the doors, and walked straight toward the men. His voice was calm but carried an edge sharp enough to cut through the rain. "That's enough. Walk away." The men sized him up, smirking at his worn jeans and oil-stained hands, but the look in Ethan's eyes wasn't one you argued with. They left, muttering under their breath, leaving the young woman trembling against the wall. She looked up at him, rain dripping from her dark hair. "You're safe now," he said quietly, offering his jacket. She hesitated, then took it, her lips trembling. She didn't know this man, but there was something steady in the way he stood, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan didn't ask questions right away. He walked her to the truck, opened the back door, and told Emily to scoot over. The young woman slid in, clutching his jacket around her, shivering. "I'm Ethan. This is my daughter, Emily," he said, starting the engine. "Where do you live?" She hesitated. "Nowhere safe," she whispered. The drive was quiet except for the rain on the windshield. Ethan recognized that tone, the sound of someone who had been running for a while, carrying more than they could bear. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her shoulders hunched as if she were trying to disappear into herself. When they reached his modest home on the edge of Brookhaven, a small New England town where everyone seemed to know everyone else, he led her inside. The warmth of the wood-burning stove wrapped around them, and Emily hurried to bring a blanket. "You can stay here tonight," Ethan said. "Spare rooms down the hall." She looked startled, as though the offer itself was foreign. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "Because you needed it," he replied simply. Her name was Claire Whitmore. At first, she gave nothing else away, but little details slipped through. Her father's name, Richard Whitmore, carried weight in business circles. Ethan recognized it immediately. Years ago, he had worked private security for Richard's tech company, before uncovering internal fraud and being blacklisted for speaking out. That betrayal had cost him his career, his reputation, and nearly his chance to adopt Emily. Now, the daughter of the man who'd ruined his life was sitting in his home, wearing his jacket. Ethan didn't know what trouble she was in, but he could see the same thing in her that he saw in every Marine who'd come home from war. That quiet, haunted look of someone carrying scars no one could see. Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Claire stood in the doorway of the living room. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded. "You don't owe me anything." She hesitated, then added, "My father, he's not the man people think he is." Her voice cracked. "I can't go back." Ethan met her gaze. "Then you won't. Not while you're here." And in that moment, something shifted. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one in this town trying to survive something bigger than himself. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains, painting soft stripes across the wooden floor. Ethan was already up, making coffee when Claire walked into the kitchen. She looked different in the daylight, pale, with faint shadows under her eyes, and a guarded expression that seemed almost permanent. Emily was perched at the small table, swinging her legs as she nibbled on toast. "Morning," she chirped. Claire managed a small smile. "Morning." Ethan poured her a cup of coffee without asking if she wanted one. "You sleep?" "Some," she murmured, wrapping her hands around the warm mug as though holding on to it for stability. He didn't press for details. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, more like two people standing on opposite banks of a river, each unsure how to cross. But the quiet didn't last. Around mid-morning, Ethan stepped outside to check on the truck, and that's when he noticed the black SUV idling down the street. Its tinted windows reflected nothing but the pale winter sky. Ethan's instincts went sharp in an instant. When he came back inside, Claire was staring at the floor, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "They're watching, aren't they?" she asked without looking up. "You saw them?" She nodded. "My father, he'll do anything to get me back under his control. If the press gets a picture of me here, it won't just be him. Everyone will know where I am." Ethan leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "If you're afraid, I can." "I'm not afraid," she interrupted, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. "I'm tired." She swallowed hard, then finally met his eyes. "I've been running from him since I left the company. I thought I could disappear, but he has people everywhere." Her words stirred something deep in Ethan, a mixture of protectiveness and bitter familiarity. "You're safe here," he said firmly. But that afternoon, as Ethan worked in the garage, he heard Emily's laughter through the open window. Claire was in the yard with her, tossing a ball back and forth. The sound was light, genuine, like it had been years since she'd allowed herself to laugh. For a moment, the shadow over her seemed to lift. It struck Ethan how quickly Emily had warmed to Claire, asking her questions, telling her stories. Emily didn't know or care about the past between Ethan and Richard Whitmore. She just saw someone who needed a friend. Later, over dinner, Claire's guard slipped a little more. She told Emily about growing up in Boston, about how she used to love drawing as a kid before her father decided it was a waste of time. "Did you stop?" Emily asked innocently. Claire hesitated. "Yes, I guess I did." Ethan watched her closely, noticing the way her voice softened when she spoke to Emily. He could see it now. Beneath the exhaustion and fear, there was someone who had been denied the chance to live on her own terms. When the dishes were done and Emily had gone to bed, Claire lingered at the table. "I know who you are," she said quietly. Ethan didn't respond right away. "You worked for my father," she continued. "I was young, but I remember your name coming up. I remember how angry he was." Ethan met her gaze evenly. "He made sure I couldn't work in the field again. I lost everything I'd been building, almost lost Emily too. But you don't have to carry his sins." She looked down, her voice almost a whisper. "You don't understand. The things I've seen him do. I can't unsee them." For the first time since she'd arrived, Ethan saw a flicker of something in her eyes, not just fear, but resolve. And he recognized it. It was the look of someone who had decided that running was no longer enough. The next 2 days passed in an uneasy rhythm. Claire helped around the house, cooked with Emily, and sometimes joined Ethan in the garage, quietly watching as he worked on customers' cars. She was cautious with her words, but more at ease in her movements, as though the walls she'd built were slowly lowering. Still, Ethan noticed how often her gaze flicked toward the windows, especially when a car slowed on the street. On the third evening, the piece cracked. A news alert popped up on Ethan's old tablet as Emily was coloring at the table. The headline read, "Richard Whitmore's daughter missing, possible abduction suspected." Emily looked up, curious. "Is that about you?" she asked Claire. Claire's face paled. She reached for the tablet, scanning the article. Her father's statement painted her as unstable, claiming she had been influenced by dangerous individuals and needed to be brought home for her own safety. Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's setting the narrative before anyone can hear your side." Claire's hands trembled. "He's not just telling lies. He's baiting people to find me. This will make me a target." Ethan thought quickly. "We'll keep you off the streets for a while. No calls. No social media. You stay here, you stay safe." But later that night, while Ethan was in the garage, he noticed movement outside. A man walking slowly past the house, phone in hand, taking photos. Ethan stepped out, calling sharply, "Can I help you?" The man froze, muttered something about wrong address, and hurried away. Ethan's pulse didn't settle until long after he locked the door. Inside, Claire was pacing the living room. "It's only a matter of time before they corner me. My father doesn't stop. He destroys." Ethan stepped closer. "You can't keep running forever. At some point, you're going to have to face him." She met his gaze, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Do you think I don't know that? But I can't go into that fight alone." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Ethan felt something shift in him. He had been burned before, scorched really by the Whitmore name. But looking at her now, he realized this wasn't about revenge or his own wounds. This was about helping someone break free from the same cruelty that had nearly crushed him. The next morning, Claire surprised him. She was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a pen and a notepad. "If I'm going to confront him, I need proof," she said. "And I need someone who knows how to handle the fallout." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're planning something." "I'm done hiding," she said simply. "He's used money and fear to keep everyone quiet. If I can expose him, maybe I can finally breathe." Ethan studied her for a moment. She wasn't the fragile figure he'd pulled from that parking lot anymore. She was gathering her strength piece by piece. "All right," he said finally. "If you're serious, we'll do it right. No mistakes." Claire nodded, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "I trust you." Those words stayed with Ethan for the rest of the day. It had been a long time since anyone had said them to him. The air in Brookhaven felt sharper that week, as if winter had decided to dig in its heels. Ethan could sense the tension hanging over the house like a low cloud. Claire was quieter than usual, but her focus had sharpened. She spent hours at the kitchen table, sorting through old emails and documents she'd somehow kept from her father's reach. One evening, she slid a folder toward Ethan. "This is a fraction of it," she said. "Financial records, contracts, internal memos. Enough to prove fraud and intimidation." Ethan flipped through the papers, his expression unreadable. "If this gets out, your father won't just be angry, he'll be desperate. And desperate people make dangerous choices." "I know," she replied, steadying her voice. "But the truth has been buried for too long." Emily wandered in then, asking for help with her homework, and the tension in the room softened for a moment. Claire leaned over the table, pointing out the answers, her voice warm in a way Ethan hadn't heard before. He realized that Claire wasn't just fighting for herself. She was starting to imagine a life beyond the shadow of her father's empire. But the outside world was closing in. By Thursday, the same black SUV had parked in the neighborhood 3 times. Ethan called a friend from his military days, a man named Mason Green, now a private investigator. "Mason, I need eyes on this," Ethan said over the phone. "And I need to know who's watching my house." Mason didn't hesitate. "Text me the plates. I'll have something for you by morning." That night, over mugs of coffee, Ethan told Claire about the call. She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing something. "You didn't have to get involved," she said softly. "Yes, I did," he replied. "You walked into my life because you needed help. I'm not the kind of man who turns his back on that." The next day, Mason arrived in person, a man in his 40s with a weathered face and quick eyes. He spread a few printed photos across the table. "They're not reporters," he said, tapping one image. "Your father's hired private security. And they're not just here to find Claire. They're here to control the story before she can speak." Claire exhaled slowly. "Then we have to move faster." Ethan leaned back, his mind already running through contingencies. "If we take this public, we do it on our terms. Not his." Mason smirked. "Sounds like you've got a plan." "We'll need proof, timing, and a safe place to speak," Ethan replied. "Somewhere the media can't be shut out." Claire looked between them, her resolve hardening. "I want to be the one to say it. To his face. And I want the world watching." Ethan studied her for a moment. The last time he'd faced Richard Whitmore, it had ended with his career in ruins. But this time felt different. This time, the truth was on their side. The plan took shape quickly, though the weight of it pressed on everyone in the house. Ethan coordinated with Mason to reach a trusted local journalist, someone known for digging into stories that powerful people wanted buried. Claire spent her nights piecing together a timeline, not just of financial fraud, but of the quiet cruelties her father had committed to keep control. By the end of the week, she had written her statement. Ethan found her in the living room late one night, the fire low, her hands gripping the pages so tightly her knuckles were white. "Read it to me," he said, taking the chair across from her. She hesitated, then began. Her voice trembled at first, but as she read, it grew steadier. She spoke of intimidation, of lies, of employees ruined for refusing to bend to corruption. She spoke of her own life, of being groomed to follow in his footsteps, then punished when she dared to choose her own path. When she finished, Ethan sat back, the silence between them thick with unspoken things. "It's strong," he said finally. "It's the truth, and it's going to hit him where it hurts most." Claire swallowed, her eyes glistening. "Do you think people will believe me?" "They'll believe you," he said, "because you're not hiding anymore." The next morning, Mason returned with news. "Your father's in Boston for a shareholder meeting," he told Claire. "It's 3 days from now. Press will be there." Claire's grip tightened around her coffee mug. "Then that's where I'll say it." Ethan nodded slowly. "If you do this, there's no going back. He'll fight harder, dirtier, and he won't care who he destroys." Claire's answer was immediate. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because I can't live in fear anymore. And I'm done letting him control the truth." The preparations became almost military in precision. Mason arranged the press contacts, Ethan secured transportation, and Claire rehearsed her statement until every word carried the weight of her resolve. Emily, sensing the tension but not the details, spent more time in her room drawing pictures, one of which she gave to Claire the night before they left. It was a simple sketch of the 3 of them standing together under a blue sky. Claire folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into her bag. Later, as the house grew quiet, she found Ethan in the garage, wiping down his tools. "When this is over," she said, "I don't know where I'll end up. But I want you to know that whatever happens, you've given me more kindness in 2 weeks than I've had in years." Ethan looked at her, his expression steady but his voice softer than usual. "And you've reminded me that some people are worth standing up for, no matter the cost." They didn't need to say more. The decision was made. Boston was colder than Brookhaven, the kind of cold that cut through coats and carried the smell of the harbor. Ethan, Mason, and Claire arrived 2 hours before the Whitmore Technologies shareholder meeting. They sat in a quiet corner of a cafe across the street from the hotel ballroom, where the event would be held. Claire kept her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, not for the taste, but for the anchor of warmth it gave her. Ethan watched the crowd outside, reporters, investors, and employees filing in, while Mason made last-minute calls to ensure the press would be ready for her statement. "You've got 2 minutes before security tries to shut it down," Mason warned. "After that, it'll be chaos." Claire nodded, her jaw set. 2 minutes is enough. When the meeting began, they slipped in at the back. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the air thick with polite applause and corporate language. At the center stage stood Richard Whitmore, polished, confident, commanding the room with the ease of a man who had never been challenged in public. Ethan could feel Claire's breathing shift beside him. He leaned in, voice low. "When you walk up there, remember who you are now, not who he made you." Her eyes flicked toward him, a flash of gratitude breaking through the tension. They waited for a lull in the speeches. When Richard began fielding questions from the audience, Claire stood. Her heels clicked against the marble as she walked down the aisle. The room turned toward her, whispers sparking like static. "Claire?" Richard's voice carried surprise, but also irritation. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," she cut in, stepping up to the microphone meant for shareholders. Her voice was steady, clear. "My name is Claire Whitmore, and for years I stayed silent about what my father has done, to his employees, to his partners, to his own family. Today, I won't stay silent anymore." The crowd shifted uneasily. Cameras clicked. Richard's face tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Not yet. Claire laid it out in 2 minutes that felt like a lifetime. The threats, the falsified contracts, the blackmail, the lives quietly dismantled when they refused to fall in line. She spoke of her own estrangement, of the night she left his house for good, of the fear that kept her quiet. And then she ended with the part that made Richard's composure crack. "I'm resigning from Whitmore Technologies, effective immediately. And I'm asking for an independent investigation into its leadership. If that means my father faces the consequences of his actions, so be it. This company does not belong to him. It belongs to the people who built it, and to the truth." Security moved in as soon as she stepped back, but by then it was too late. Every word had been recorded. Ethan was already moving through the crowd to meet her, Mason covering their exit. They pushed out into the freezing air, breaths steaming, hearts pounding. Claire didn't look back. "It's done," she said, almost to herself. Ethan glanced at her. "It started," he corrected. The media storm hit before they even made it back to Brookhaven. Clips of Claire's speech flooded social media. News anchors debated every line, and opinion columns swung between calling her brave whistleblower and entitled traitor. Ethan kept his truck radio off during the long drive. Claire sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone in silence, the screen's glow casting shadows across her face. Emily slept in the back seat, her head resting against a pillow, blissfully unaware of the chaos building outside their small world. By the time they reached Ethan's house, reporters were already parked along the road. Cameras and microphones pointed toward the driveway, their voices calling questions through the cold air. Mason pulled up behind them in his SUV, stepping out to act as a buffer. "Go inside," he told Ethan. "I'll deal with this." Inside, the familiar scent of wood and motor oil wrapped around them like a shield. Claire set her phone down on the counter and leaned against it, her hands trembling. "He's going to come after me harder now," she said, her voice low. "And I don't mean just legally." Ethan studied her for a moment. "Then we don't make it easy for him. You're not alone in this." The next few days blurred into a mix of tension and small moments of calm. Emily made hot chocolate for Claire because she looked sad. Neighbors dropped off groceries when they saw the crowd of reporters keeping its distance at the end of the road. Mason brought updates. The board of Whitmore Technologies was calling an emergency meeting, and 2 key investors had already withdrawn their support from Richard. But Richard's counterattack came swiftly. A smear campaign emerged online. Fabricated stories about Claire's personal life, accusations of theft, rumors designed to paint her as unstable. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Claire found Ethan in the garage, tightening bolts on an engine that didn't really need fixing. "I hate that he can still reach me," she admitted. "I hate that even now, part of me still hears his voice telling me I'm nothing without him." Ethan set the wrench down and looked at her. "That voice isn't the truth. But I know it takes time to believe that." She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "And how do you know?" "Because I had my own version of that voice once," he said quietly. "Different person. Same poison. Took me years to shut it out. But I did. And so will you." That night, Claire slept for the first time in days without waking up from nightmares. 2 mornings later, Mason arrived with news that could change everything. A whistleblower inside the company's legal department is ready to testify. She's got documents, contracts, emails, payment records. The real kind of evidence that can't be spun away. Claire's breath caught. "If we can get that to the right people." "We will," Mason assured her. "But it means you're going to be in the middle of this for a lot longer than you planned." Ethan caught her eye. "If you're staying in the fight, we stay with you." Her answer came without hesitation. "Then we fight." Winter melted slowly into spring, but the tension of the past months clung like frost that refused to thaw. The investigation into Whitmore Technologies unfolded like a storm front, slow to arrive, then impossible to ignore. The whistleblower's documents were damning. Payments to shell companies, falsified safety reports, memos instructing employees to destroy evidence, all tied directly to Richard Whitmore. The case caught the attention of federal authorities, and subpoenas began to fly. Claire was called to testify. She stood before a panel in a crisp navy suit, her voice steady as she answered every question. The moment wasn't easy. Each word felt like breaking chains that had been locked for years. But when she walked out of the hearing room, Ethan was there, waiting by the courthouse steps. "You did it," he said simply. She shook her head. "We did it." News broke 2 weeks later. Richard Whitmore was stepping down as CEO, citing health reasons, though the truth was obvious to anyone paying attention. The board announced sweeping reforms, and the company's stock took a hit. But for the first time in years, its employees felt the possibility of change. In Brookhaven, life began to return to something like normal. The reporters faded away, replaced by curious but friendly faces from the community. Some came to the garage for work on their cars. Others came just to shake Ethan's hand or thank Claire for what she'd done. One Saturday afternoon, the 3 of them, Ethan, Claire, and Emily, stood in the backyard, hanging a new wooden swing from the old oak tree. Emily's laughter filled the air as she tested it, kicking her legs high. "You know," Claire said softly, watching her, "I used to think my future was just whatever my father decided it would be. Now, I think I get to decide for myself." Ethan smiled, looping the rope over the branch. "That's the thing about freedom. It's heavy at first. But it gets lighter the longer you carry it." She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't think I could have carried it without you." He met her gaze, his voice quiet but sure. "You could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." The weeks that followed weren't perfect. Healing never happened all at once. Claire still had nights where memories crept in, and Ethan still carried the old scars of his own battles. But there was laughter now and shared meals, and the kind of trust that doesn't fade easily. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Brookhaven, the 3 of them sat on the porch steps. Emily leaned against Ethan, half asleep, while Claire rested her head on his shoulder. The air smelled of grass and faint motor oil from the garage. "I used to think home was a place," Claire said quietly. "Now I know it's the people who see you, even when the rest of the world doesn't." Ethan's arm tightened around her. "Then you're home." For the first time in years, Claire believed it.